Hello everyone, welcome back to our session on evidences for evolution. In the last sessions we have discussed the two evidences for evolution, and we are now in the third one, which is the evidences from paleontology or from fossil record. Fossils and fossilization. So in this session we'll be looking on to what are fossils, how they are formed, what are their different types, and also how do we date or find the age of the fossils. We'll be looking on, or we'll be discussing with something around four different radio dating techniques which are being practiced now. So we'll start with fossils and fossilization. So fossil is nothing but any remains, either it be plant or animal, from the remote past, which is preserved in any natural material like rocks, muds, sand. Then it might be the lava, etc. Whatever it is, it might be regarded as a fossil. So, and the process of the formation of such a fossil is usually termed as fossilization. So, fossil can be bones, teeth, shells, footprint, impressions, etc. And and majority of the organisms, plants and animals, they are not fossilized. It is the reason for that is most organisms when they die, the process of decay happens, then destruction, then predators or scavengers might wait for most of the dying organisms, and only some percentage of the majority of the animals which were present on the earth had a chance to become fossil. And the conditions which are required for fossilization are the fossilization are the dead body should be quickly buried, it should be protected from destructive forces, it should be prevented from oxidation because anaerobic conditions are required for fossilization. Then the organism should possess some hard parts, because in most cases the hard parts are the ones which we obtain from fossils, because soft parts either they decay off or the soft parts, they do not stay for long by microbial action, etc. They decay off, and that is not usually obtained. But the hard parts are the ones which are usually the shells, the bones, etc. are the ones that is usually obtained in fossils. But there are some fossil records where you get the entire organism as such. For example, from the Arctics, where the organisms was preserved in ice, or the organism when it is preserved in amber, or when the organism is preserved in asphalt, etc. They are preserved as a whole. But in most cases, only the hard parts, etc., are obtained as fossils. Coming to the methods, or the different methods by which fossils are formed, which is fossilization, the common method is burial in sediments, and usually it happens in oceans rather than in land. Because in land the destructive forces are more in action. As a result, fossilization rarely happens on land, but in oceans or in the larger water bodies, it happens regularly. As more and more sediments are laid on, the depth of the fossil increases, hence, the older fossils are expected to be found on the deepest layer. What happens here is when the aquatic animals die, they may fall into the ocean bed, and over the ocean beds, the sediments start to accumulate, and these sediments protect them from scavengers and oxidation. Soft parts decay off and they are carried by the seepage of water. Hard parts get replaced by minerals. That means the shape of the bones will be preserved, or the shape of the hard parts like the shells, etc. They will be preserved by an impression of minerals. And as time progresses, the lower layer of sediments, enclosing the fossil, hardens as a rock, thus preserving the record of the fossil in them. And there are the different types of or the fossils. The method of fossilization is, the other methods are, the fossils can also be formed by, rather than from sediments, the dust storms, volcanic acids, and desert winds. They can bury and preserve organisms as fossils. They can be trapped in asphalt. Asphalt is nothing but, asphalt is a gel-like substance, or a sticky viscous substance, which is resultant, or you can call it as a byproduct of petroleum products, or it is result of when the in the petrol springs, when the volatile oils they evaporate, the sticky asphalt remains. And In this asphalt, the sticky substance, when animals get trapped in, these animals become fossils in them. The entire or the shells or the hard parts will be trapped in this asphalts. Next is amber preservation. The amber, which is a gummy extrudation of the prehistoric trees, also preserve insects, spiders, mites, etc. Next is another process called as petrifaction. Here, the actual remains, that means etc., bones, shells, etc., they might be replaced by minerals of iron, silica, etc. In such cases, these preserve only the hard parts, not the soft parts. But rarely there are reports of soft parts being petrified. So here you can see some of the pictures which are showing the different types of fossils. In the upper section, you can see the amber preserved fossil of insects, spiders, mosquitoes, etc. And you can also see the asphalt preserved fossils. They can see how animals get trapped in the asphalt and they are preserved in the particular substance. And as you can see, the left hand, the downset left hand picture shows the lava preserved fossil when the volcanic eruptions occurs. The animals which are entrapped in it, they form the lava preserved fossils. And the next is the other three photos, which is shown in the lower portion, is of petrified fossils. You can see that the entire structure is preserved, all the structures are preserved, even the teeth, the structure of the teeth itself is preserved, but you can see that it is not the normal structure, it is other minerals which are being deposited. The same is the case with the starfish and the other mollusk which is shown there. The shell is now, or the shell, the rings of the shell is now replaced by minerals. So when the original thing is replaced by any minerals, the process is called as petrifaction. Next is the types of fossils. The first one is the actual remains. The actual remains are, as I mentioned earlier, in the Arctic seas, the deep sea sediments, the volcanic ashes, then the amber, asphalt, etc. The dead animals are preserved, or the animals are preserved as such, even with the soft body parts. The examples are in Siberia, about 100 large woolly mammoths were preserved as such, even with the hair and flesh, and amber preserved insects were obtained from the Baltic region, which is in the northern Europe. Now, the second type is the petrified fossils. As we mentioned earlier, they are formed when the original parts of the organisms are replaced by minerals, and the process is called as petrifaction. And not only they retain the external, but also the internal characters is preserved in them. Different minerals like silica, iron pyrides, calcium carbonate, magnesium carbonate, etc. are involved in this process. And depending upon the material that is being, the mineral is being deposited inside the fossil, they are classified as silicification. The process is classified as silicification when the original material is replaced by silica, and that is usually seen in sponges. Next is pyritization, when iron pyrites are involved in fossil formation. Next is carbonization. The body parts are replaced by carbon compounds, and dolomitization is the carbonate mineral. Dolomite is formed when magnesium ions replace the calcium ions in another carbonate mineral, which is calcite. That it is a double replacement of ions, which occurs here, which is called as dolomitization. So these are the four different processes of petrified fossil, or the different process of petrification depending upon the material which is being replaced. And coming to the third type, which is the moulds. Mould is nothing but the hollow cavity which is left in the mud by the dead body. And what happens here is when the organism dies, its impression will be laid down on the mud, and as a result, as time progresses, the surrounding material hardens. As a result, you can see a mould or the markings of the animal in the particular stone. So the original parts decay and disappear, leaving a cavity which is called as a mould. Here you can get the exact size, shape, and the external structure, but not the internal structures. You can see in the diagrams the different structures which are being molded. And next is the cast. Cast is same as mould. The difference is that when a mould is filled with some mineral, so that you get a shape or a particular shape for that particular thing rather than an impression. You get a shape of that particular structure, and jellyfishes and skull etc. are discovered in such cast. Next is coprolites or coprolith. They are fossilized feces of animals, and this provides, so you can see the diagram, one of the fossil which is being obtained. They provide information about the shape of the intestine and also food habits, and hence this particular fossils, they are called as trace fossils. Trace fossils meaning they do not give a picture of the entire organism or what type of organism it was. It gives an idea about an organism which lived in that particular period, and what type of diet it had, and what type of intestine or habit and habitat it had. Next is the sixth type of fossil, which is the tracks and trails. So tracks are the footprints of walking animals, and trails are produced by the crawling of the worms, snails, etc. in soft mud. And usually they are preserved by sedimentation and hardening. You can see the footsteps of a bird or something like that, which was recovered as a fossil. So these are the different types of fossils. So in the first session, or in this particular session, we saw what are fossil and the process of fossilization, the different methods by which fossils are found, and the same thing we converted it to what are the different types of fossils. And next is our discussion on fossil dating. So that will be discussed in the next session.